I recently heard this story. Father was learning with his sons over Shabbos afternoon, as many people do. Sefer Bereshis, learning all about Avram Avinu, and they learned really, really well. So the father said, "You know what, boys? We're gonna have a treat. We'll have a malka tonight. We're gonna go out for pizza." Right? So they went out for pizza. So they're sitting around, they're schmoozing, and then there was the last slice. We've all been there before. That awkward moment of, what do I do? Will anyone notice if I take it? Should I go slowly? Should I just go for it, grab it? Should I pretend I didn't realize it was the last piece? We've all done that before. And the father realizes this, and he says, "You know what, boys? We just spent the whole Shabbos hearing amazing Divrei Torah, learning about Avram Avinu, the pillar of Chesed. Avram Avinu implanted within us a midah of Chesed. Avram was mevater; he was willing to forego his own needs for other people. So, what would Avram Avinu do with the last slice of pizza? Good musar." So one of the boys, super fast, says, "You know what? You're right. I'm going to be mevater. He can be Avram. I'll take the pizza." That was great. Real story. It's like you almost got it right up until the last minute, and then you just took the wrong exit. This reminds me of a piece that I once saw from Rabbi Schneider. Might be relevant to the times. I want to just focus more on Parsha and us. Rabbi noted that historically, when you look at liberations, revolutions, they often are followed by a period of chaos and bloodshed. That's what Rabbi noted. Think the Russian Revolution, think the French Revolution. Apologies to the French Russians. But he said these manifest in 4 different ways. I'm going to present Rav Aaron's 4 different manifestations. We could argue on the categorization. It might be 3, it might be 2, but okay. One, he says, is there's a sense of confusion with the shift in power. I don't really know how to relate to who's in charge. That's number 1. Number 2 is that victims of slavery and oppression, his languages tend to throw off the shackles of moral law. Morality becomes a little bit more fluid at that point. Number 3, there's a seeking of or thirst for revenge. Again, that might be 2 and 3 might be related. Okay, that's just for our purposes. And number 4, he says that following a revolution, a liberation, there begins a prolonged, protracted quest for a new identity, and that plagues the society for a long period of time. Those are the 4 things he notices: relationship with new power, the sliding morality, revenge, and a search for a new identity. Those are 4 things Rav Aaron noticed. He says, but Yetzias Mitzrayim is not like that. Because Rav Aaron Soloveitchik said, Yetzias Mitzrayim was not about a cherus haguf. It was not a physical redemption, freedom. It was what he calls a cherus hanefesh. It was on a spiritual level. Yetzias Mitzrayim demanded, he said, self-discipline, control, and that self-discipline and control ultimately allows the spirit to flourish and somehow obviates those problems. We'll come back to that. Rav Aaron is bothered implicitly by a pasuk in our parsha. The pasuk says that Bnei Israel had to do certain things, the Mishnayos talk about, when they celebrated Pesach and they brought a korban Pesach Mitzrayim, that were not relevant at any other time. Blood on the doorposts, etc. Now, the pasuk says, why are we putting the blood on the doorposts? Because lo bechem negef lemashchis bakosi beretz Mitzrayim. Because of the mashchis, because of the destroyer. So says Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, who is this destroyer? So he says, I think creatively, he says the upheaval itself is the destroyer. Sometimes when you go through a liberation, sometimes when you go through a revolution, noting those 4 manifestations, thinking, Russian Revolution, French Revolution, he says, well, sometimes that actually is the destruction. So if you have the blood on the doorpost, Rashi says the blood is on the inside, it's for us. It's for us to remember, to keep in mind. Well, then, says Rav Aaron Soloveitchik, we are not going to fall prey to something which is historically prevalent. Now, I think this is a nice idea. I'm just always bothered by these types of things. sometimes the Torah has, sometimes you have a machlokes rishonim even, is this a mitzvah l'daros? Is this a mitzvah or a conversation that's relevant forever? Or it's only relevant for that moment in history? So, this issue seems to be much more relevant to a certain historical period than it is in our own lives. Because as much as we celebrate Pesach, and we talk about, I should view myself as if I'm leaving Mitzrayim, well, I'm not, and I'm not going to fall prey to this, I don't think that anyone's ever heard of post-Pesach bloodshed. I haven't heard of. I've heard of diets after Pesach, but I haven't heard of this. So I do think, though, just if reflecting on this, I think it is relevant for us on an individual level. Let me try and explain. Many of us in this room, over the last years, decades, have gone through liberations, revolutions in our lives. How many of us thought we would have been here today doing what we're doing in this way 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Probably most of us would not. We've been granted a freedom, a gift, a heritage, Torah, mitzvahs. Amazing, beautiful. But at the same time, I think we have to be on the lookout for similar types of characteristics and manifestations that can lead to the upheaval becoming the chaos and the destruction in our own personal lives. Let me just give you some examples of how I think this comes up. Let's start with this first, the confusion in terms of a shift of power. A person can be very inspired by a Shabbos meal, by Dvar Torah, by the beauty of a Jewish family, of Hanukkah candles, of the Torah Min HaShamayim, Har Sinai. I can be inspired by all those things. But to ask me to give up my autonomy, well, that's something totally different. That's putting Hashem in charge. And some of us are okay with that. But come on, the rabbis, the Drabanans, no. That I'm not willing to do. Divine things I could give up my autonomy for, but I can't give up my autonomy to some other person. And some of us are willing to do that. Ravina, Ravashi, Chasimus Talmud, that's okay. Gemara, okay. But later rabbinic interpretation and Psak Halacha, no. That's too much for me. And some of us are even willing to do that. The rabbi knows what he's talking about in the area of halacha. That dirty word, minhag? Ooh, no, minhag, that's customary. I don't have to do customary. And then we even talk about, there's no custom, this is just communal norms and standards. Communal norms and standards, that is no, where are you going to show me in Shulchan Aruch about that? Look at that. And these are challenges that we're facing. Because we're giving up our autonomy, in a certain sense, for something else. This is a challenge that we face. I think the question of identity is certainly something that we face. I've transformed myself. I'm now a Shomer Shabbos guy. I'm a Mamin. Okay, I'm in. But then I find out and there's so many ways I can be in. What does that mean? Now I'm searching for identity again. Which way do I go? And sometimes I know where I go, but it's a different type of confusion. I'm a normal guy, and I'm just tacking on Torah mitzvahs, or I'm an Eved Hashem and hopefully trying to be normal. Which one? There's identity confusions. I think we also, some of us, not talking about anybody in particular, but just noting, some of us struggle with the idea of revenge. Well, what does it mean, revenge here? I don't think anyone's ever actively taken revenge. But sometimes the way we speak or relate to institutions, types of people who we might have associated with in the past, we tend to throw them under the bus. That's terrible, that's horrible. They're ruining everything. Now, whether they are or not, I'm not here to debate right now. But the idea of how am I speaking when I'm taking revenge, so to speak, on those types of people or those groups, those institutions, that's also something to be cautious of. And finally, the idea of the relaxed morality. So we would hope that when it comes to growing in the realm of Torah mitzvahs, so that should not be a downgrade of morality, that should be an upgrade of morality. That being said, I think sometimes we struggle with this because I'm so focused on Shabbos and Kashrus and Brachos, and I got to learn how to learn the Gemara properly, and I got to understand Rashi, and I got to understand Tosfos. And what happened to those pesky things called midos? Come on, that's for the other people. That's not for me. That's not for now. We get a little bit more relaxed when it comes to midos. Just as an example, most of us, I'm assuming, were taught at some point in our lives, when you finish eating, you move the plate to the place where the plate's supposed to go at the end of that meal. I'm assuming most of us got that lesson at some point in our lives. I'm assuming most of us got the lesson, when you spill something, you pick it up. I'm going on an assumption over here. Somehow, in Bnei Torah and Yeshiva, we forgot that one. Because I'm so focused on the Gemara, and I got to get to davening, I got to learn Shabbos and Kashrus and this and that. I forgot this one little thing. Get a little lax with some of the midos. And what's at risk over here is the upheaval becoming destructive at the end of the day. Because now, what I used to be a good guy, I used to be the people that respected, and now people look at me and say, "What are you doing?" The revolution that I'm undertaking could actually be destructive forces of Aaron Salvation. So, says Rav Aaron, what is the Torah strategy to solve this, obviate this? Maybe help us. So, in a soundbite, I think the answer is, it requires us to look at things bigger than ourselves. To view ourselves as something bigger than just me. My daughter was telling me today that in her high school, it's a very interesting high school, they take the 9th grade girls, I don't know how they do this without the girls screaming and freaking out, but they take them in a hot air balloon, and they give them a Musar Shmuze about, we're going to look at things bigger than just us. They give a shiur about everything that's around them. Again, I don't know how they do this without the girls freaking out, but okay. But that idea, I think, is a beautiful idea. There's more than just me here. And I think that this, Rav Aaron Soloveitchik develops idea and relates this to Kabbalas Torah, Har Sinai. Torah is our defining characteristic, and I'm not going to question that, but I think there's something that is the precursor to that greases the wheels for that. In the Torah, the pasuk says, "Uvnei Yisrael asuk." They're getting ready to leave. Paro has come and said, "Get out." So before the next paragraph, which begins, "Vayisu bnei Yisrael Ramses," when they're leaving, the Torah says, "Uvnei Yisrael asuk dvar Moshe." They, Jewish people, acted like Moshe told them to do. V'yishalu miMitzrayim. They asked of the Egyptians klei kesef, klei zahav, for the gold and silver. Okay. Says Rashi. What does it mean, Kidvar Moshe? Sha'amar lahem b'Mitzrayim v'yishalu ishmei Esrayehu. Because it says earlier, a parak earlier, it says you should ask your neighbors. No, great. The Gra is very bothered by this for two different reasons. Number one, the Gra says, why do I need Rashi to tell me something that I read a parak ago? Most of us hopefully can remember what we just read 2 or 3 pages ago till now. That's the Gemara's first question. The other question that the Gemara is bothered by is based on the Gemara in Baba Kama. The Gemara in Baba Kama says that in order for, when we see the word Re'ehu, your fellow in the Torah, that only refers to Klal Yisrael. That's the Gemara's rule. So says the Gemara, there are 2 different events that occur that we've been conflating. We thought that when we get to Parak Yud Beis over here, and it says that they asked the Mitzrim, and Rashi says, as they did, as Moshe told them to do earlier, Moshe told them earlier, you're going to ask your neighbors the Mitzrim. And they did, they asked the Mitzrim. Says the Gemara, no, that's not what happened. There's 2 different things. Moshe told them, go ask Klal Yisrael for their things. Everyone should borrow from each other, help out each other. And if you're able to do that, says the Gra, then you will be zocha to a geula and to come out of Mitzrayim, and then you'll be able to ask the Mitzrayim. But says the Gra, the first stage is the chesed within Klal Yisrael. That is the precursor, that is the necessary requirement in order to finally get out of Mitzrayim. You have to build this chesed. Rav Soloveitchik developed this idea also in one of the essays they put out. He describes, maybe we'll pose it as the question. If you've ever been there at Seder night, so We come in and everyone schmoozes and talks about what the rabbi spoke about and whatever. Everyone fights about who's sitting where. And then by the time you sit down and you make kiddush, you get going a little bit. So you say, Kol dichlin yesev yecho. Anyone who's hungry, come and eat. It's the most ridiculous thing you've ever heard about. Now, who is that directed at? The people at the table? If you're hungry, come and eat, but you got to wait a few hours. Doesn't make sense. People on the couch who are sleeping? No. We're inviting the people who need help, who need a place to eat. The only problem is the door's closed, door's locked, or maybe not, Pesach night, whatever. Who are we inviting? The Pesach invitations go out, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months before Pesach. People are already making the invites. Maybe the last minute invite. You clap on the bima after marriage. Does anyone need a last minute place? We have space. Once you're at home, who are you inviting? Says Rav Soloveitchik, you're not inviting anyone. It's a declaration of who we are. Says Rav Soloveitchik, Seder night is the night of what he calls creation of a chesed community. We're creating a chesed community. We are declaring that we are people that give. Korban Pesach is something that cannot be done by yourself. It must be done as part of a chavura. You have to sign up in advance. I think I once saw from Rav Zalman Tzaratzkin. He said there's a special halacha that when it comes to eating Korban Pesach, you can't leave the house. So he says, even if you get into a fight with your family, even if they don't serve the wrong food, someone tells an off-color joke, you can't leave. You have to stay together. You're building a community, says Rav Soloveitchik. So we're building a chesed community. That is what Korban Pesach is. That's what Seder night is. So that's what the precursor is before we leave Mitzrayim. We're creating an awareness of people beyond ourselves. There is something much greater than myself. When we do that, where we end up is Har Sinai. The famous Rashi that the Klal Yisrael stood at Har Sinai, Kish echad b'leiv echad. They stood together. The precursor to Kabbalas Torah is you have to be together. You have to have an awareness of, you have to have chesed for each other. Can't speak about this topic without sharing a Rambam. This is a fridge magnet, bumper sticker, hashtag Rambam. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Yantif, we know there's a mitzvah midaraisa of Simchas Yantif. So the Rambam says, how does that get expressed? So, men have their own ways, and women have their own ways, and kids have their own way. And then the Rambam says, "Aval misha no dlasos chatzera." You close off your door. V'ochel v'shosehu bano v'ishto, and you eat, you drink. You're very happy. Just me and my family. Veinu machal mashke v'aniyim umari nefesh, and I don't consider other people. Ein ze simchas mitzvah el simchas kreisa. There is no simcha of mitzvah there. That's just stuffing yourself. You want to have simcha in our lives. We want to grow. You have to be taking care of other people. This is the Tara process that we're going through. The Gemara says that we used to have korbanos. Korbanos would help us achieve atonement. And nowadays we don't have that. We don't have a shulchan like the mikdash. But what we have, says the Gemara, we have our own shulchan. We have our own tables. What does it mean to have our own tables? So I would have said Shabbos meals, Zmiros, Divrei Torah. Says Rashi, Hachnasas Orchim. Where do you get kapara, says Rashi? Hachnasas Orchim. Taking care of other people. This is I think the critical message for us. We want to avoid our growth, our revolutions, our liberations, our connection to Torah mitzvahs not becoming itself a destroyer. There's only one way to do it. Expanding the definition of self, looking beyond ourselves, looking at other people. We want to grow to become Talmid Chacham. We want to grow in Torah. We have to take care of other people. So I think that this is, let's call it food for thought, if nothing else. There are so many ways that we can engage in chesed. Chesed does not equal necessarily manning a soup kitchen. It can, but it doesn't have to. There's so much chesed that can go on right here. The chesed of taking care of the base medrash. The chesed of putting the food away. In Shapell's, you're a veteran of the yeshiva if you've been here for like 3 weeks. You're like one of the alter bachrim already. So, someone here is not here for 3 weeks? Oh, look at that, I could help. Maybe Ramesh has a tshuva where he talks about giving meiser. I have to give 10% of my money. I don't make money, says Ramesh. Yeah. Give 10% of your time. Help people. Oh, maybe I know something someone else doesn't know. Maybe we'd like to learn B'chavrusa. There's so many opportunities. We don't even have to leave the base medrash to do chesed. And it's not that chesed is something different, something outside of what we're trying to do in terms of our growth in Torah, in Shabbos, in Kashrus, in Brachos, etc. It's one and the same. It's the precursor. It's what greases the wheels for us to get there. And if we don't do that, then ultimately what's going to happen is all our growth, all our desires are going to just turn and become destructive forces. That's what we're trying to avoid. Maybe there's some food for thought.